Welcome back to Eyes on Israel, powered by Israel 365. Be sure to visit Israel365.com to check out all we have to offer there. Make Israel365news.com the place you go for accurate news and information about Israel from a biblical perspective. And be sure to follow me at Rabbi PW on Getter and X. And finally, as we build the Eyes on Israel community, be sure to spread the word about this show, and may God bless you for it. On November 26th of this past year, a demonstration was held in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets to show support for former President Jair Bolsonaro, a Christian identified with the political right, and to protest the current left-wing socialist Lula regime. Interestingly, there was a significant number of Israeli flags in the crowd. Now, why would pro-Bolsonaro, anti-socialist demonstrators in Brazil be waving Israeli flags? What does Israel and her current struggles have to do with opposition to socialism in Brazil? To fully appreciate the significance of this phenomenon, we should note that it's not limited to Brazilian Bolsonaro supporters. Consider the following quote from Geert Wilders, the leader of the right-wing nationalist PVV party in the Netherlands, who was recently elected to lead that nation's government. Quote, "The war against Israel is not a war against Israel. It is a war against the West. It is jihad. Israel is simply receiving the blows that are meant for all of us. If there would have been no Israel, Islamic imperialism would have found other venues to release its energy and its desire for conquest. The end of Israel would not mean the end of our problems with Islam, but only the beginning." Wilders and Bolsonaro are not outliers. Across the populist nationalist right throughout the world, support for Israel is the growing norm. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán and newly elected Argentinian President Javier Milei are two more examples of conservative nationalist leaders who are staunch supporters of Israel. Orbán has gone so far as to outlaw pro-Hamas demonstrations in Hungary. Hungary has also stood alone in vetoing multiple anti-Israel resolutions over the past month. First, Hungary was the sole European Union government to oppose a call by EU nations to prevent Israel from invading Rafah. And then, Hungary vetoed an attempt to pass sanctions by the EU against Israeli residents of Judea and Samaria. Throughout the world, populist nationalism is on the rise. While there are many issues that unite this movement across different continents and different nations, one issue stands above the rest. Supporters of Milei, Wilders, Orbán, and Bolsonaro, and others all understand that Western civilization is under attack and that the Israel-Hamas war is the front lines in that battle. From the pro-Hamas anti-Christmas demonstrations we saw in London, New York, and elsewhere, it's becoming clearer that this interpretation of the current moment is quite accurate. The seemingly laughable Queers for Palestine crowd actually makes a lot of sense. The very same cultural political camp that wants to tear down traditional Western values seeks the destruction of Israel. For Israelis, I think the time has come for some self-awareness. The entire Zionist project is the ultimate expression of Judeo-Christian nationalism, whether we admit it to ourselves or not. A successfully capitalist nation-state built on a religious ethnic identity with roots in the Bible checks all the boxes that the progressive globalist left despises. The left's abandonment of Israel was always inevitable. Is it true that right-wing nationalists have traditionally been infected with anti-Semitism in their camp? Certainly. But times are changing. On the left, anti-Semitism is growing and being normalized, while on the right, it's receding and being replaced by admiration for the state of Israel as the one country that is fighting back against jihadist Islam. And as Israelis, it's time that we understood the historical moment we are in. and embrace this new reality and learn who our true friends really are. Joining me now is Brian Leib. He's an entrepreneur, a frequent contributor to various TV news programs, and a foreign policy expert. He's the CEO and founder of Hungary Public Relations, a PR firm dedicated to elevating conservative voices, brands, and organizations in the national and international media. In addition, he's a senior fellow at the Center for Fundamental Rights in Budapest, Hungary. Brian, welcome to Eyes on Israel.
Rabbi, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here, and congratulations to you and everyone at Real America's Voice on this new program. So needed now more than ever before. Congratulations.
Thank you, Brian. So, Brian, not long ago, we had the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, stand up in the Senate, criticize Israel, call for new elections there, and notably, and this is where it relates to my monologue teeing you up, he said that Israel cannot afford to be a pariah, basically warning Israel that we are on the verge of being isolated. Is Israel actually isolated in the world?
I think certainly there's a lot of rifts between the Biden administration and the Bibi administration right now. I think that's pretty clear for all of us to see. But where there is no rift when it comes to Israeli and American relations is people to people, and especially on the Republican side. Every single Republican in the House and in the Senate on a federal level stands with Israel. We've seen that in words and in actions, and you're going to continue to see that. Unfortunately, we've seen the Democratic Party really abandon, in a lot of ways, the support for Israel. The resolutions that we see on the House floor and Senate floors are overwhelmingly supported only by Democrats and not by Republicans. So, listen, I don't think Israel is isolated. I think certainly there is a rift between Biden and Bibi, but we also, I think, have to look bigger than this. And it speaks to your opening monologue in that, Israel has to look around the world for who their true friends are right now more than ever before. And you mentioned some of the countries and leaders that are standing tall with Israel. And I think Israelis really need to understand that. And there's more countries too. I mean, you have Italy's Meloni, who is also standing tall. I mean, there's a lot of other countries that really are standing with Israel. And they're standing with Israel, by the way, for my opinion, because they have a strong belief in understanding in Judeo-Christian values. That's the bedrock of a lot of these societies, from Hungary to Poland to Italy to the Netherlands. It's a base knowledge and understanding of Judeo-Christian values, something that I think in America we maybe have lost touch with a little bit, unfortunately.
Yeah, Brian, so you've been very involved with Hungary. I mentioned your work there in introducing you. And Hungary, really standing alone, has really stood out. In the current geopolitical makeup, where you have the China, Russia, Iran axis, which is overtly anti-Israel, and then you have the kind of EU, globalist, Biden administration gang who've been breathing down Israel's neck, trying to pressure Israel to do things that are against our own self-interests. And standing alone, seemingly isolating themselves on Israel's behalf, is Hungary. Can you speak specifically to Hungary's affinity for Israel? Where does that come from, and how should we understand it?
Well, let me first start by telling you a very, very brief story. I promise it won't be a long story. I was in Budapest 2 days after October 7th. In fact, when my plane was landing to speak at a pro-Israel summit that was organized by the Center for Fundamental Rights, I was starting to get all the videos and images in of the horrific attacks that were happening in Israel. And the Center for Fundamental Rights made a decision to move forward with the summit, but they turned it into a solidarity summit. And it was at that summit that I met with every single leader you can possibly think of within Hungary. But there was one conversation in particular that really stood out to me, and that was with Hungary's defense minister. And I went over to him after his speech, which was just a truly amazing speech, and I put my hand on his shoulder. I said, "It's an honor to meet you, and thank you so much for committing to stand with Israel." And he looked at me, he leaned in, he got a little close, and he put his hand back on my shoulder. So hands on each shoulder right now. And he says to me, "Brian, when the world turns on Israel, and we all know they will, Hungary is going to continue to stand tall with Israel." So it's a nice story, I think,
Wow.
for the Israeli people to hear and know. And I think, listen, when it comes to Hungary, it has one of the largest Jewish communities in all of Europe, a very thriving community, continuing to grow. But Hungary, like a lot of these other European countries, they believe in Judeo-Christian values, and they believe in supporting the Jewish community inside of their own country in Hungary, and also on the world stage in Israel. And in fact, Hungary was one of the first countries to send C-130 or whatever their version of a cargo plane is into Israel, and sending in supplies. And we've seen Hungary standing, with Israel on the world stage at the EU. Hungary's foreign minister visited Israel just recently, gave a brilliant interview to the Jerusalem Post, where he unequivocally said that Israel has to finish the job with Hamas. No ifs, ands, or buts. It is an existential threat for Israel, but also, for the world. So, I think back to your question, why is Hungary standing with Israel? I think it's the Judeo-Christian values for sure that they believe in, but I also think it's just common sense. I mean, Hungary is a country of common sense that, has really just stood firm and stood tall. And you mentioned how, pro-Hamas protesters have been banned. I mean, here's another little piece of information for your audience. Holocaust denial in Hungary is illegal. If you say anything publicly, from a bullhorn in a public square to sitting in a restaurant privately, if it's publicly said, or you're doing anything to deny the Holocaust existed, you can be arrested and charged and put in jail for up to 3 years. So it's just, this is common sense things and zero tolerance policies that I think Hungary is leading on the world stage when it comes to these things.
Brian Leib, thank you so much for joining us on Eyes on Israel. We hope to have you back many, many times. We'll be right back with more Eyes on Israel right after this.